Today we're going to take an electric guitar that sounds like this and turn it into a fully sampled instrument in Ableton Live and Mainstage that sounds like this. Hey folks, I'm David from Sunday Sounds, where our focus is making it easy for anyone to achieve success in the worship keys position at your church. Today, in this episode of Patch Stories, we're going to be sharing the inspiration, ideas, and process behind the sounds that we release and create here at Sunday Sounds. Now, we set out to fix one of the biggest weak spots inside of Ableton Live and Mainstage, and that is the guitar samples, the sample-based guitar instruments that come inside of those two softwares. We'll just say that they are a little less than inspiring. Now you can do a good bit with audio effects and processing to make the factory guitar instruments inside these softwares sound as good as they can, but there are hard limits to what you can really achieve. We wanted to take that a step further and build something from the ground specifically designed to sit in the modern worship music style where electric guitars are such a big component. We knew to do that we'd actually have to sample a guitar ourselves. So in order to make this actually end up landing and feel like a real instrument, we knew we'd have to start with a really specific and detailed strategy for how we were going to sample the instrument. So let's start there. So once we decided we were going to do this, I knew the first thing that we had to figure out was how to sample the guitar so it didn't just sound like a bunch of individual notes being played back, but it actually sounded like the feel and the voicing and the experience of hearing an electric guitar. Now, I knew this would be a big challenge, but it also sounded like a ton of fun, so I started out planning the sampling process. Okay, so before we get into any more guitar sampling, I'm gonna take a break. We are over here at my mom's house in the backyard because I wanted you to see this set of wind chimes over my shoulder. These wind chimes were sampled to make up the new Thankful Chimes instrument in Sunday Keys, and I want to tell you a little bit about this set of wind chimes. It was inherited by my mom when her brother passed away a few years ago. It's been in the backyard here at my mom's house ever since, and I really love the sound of this set of wind chimes because the interval range is just really cool. So often wind chimes have a major key sort of tonality or melody baked into them, and this set of wind chimes is a little bit more haunting than that, and I've always really loved sitting in mom's backyard and hearing these wind chimes as the wind blows. So when we were here at Thanksgiving, I didn't have my field recorder with me. I wasn't planning to do any sampling on the holiday, but once I heard these wind chimes, I was just like, I gotta record these. So I came out in the yard and I just opened up the Voice Memos app on my iPhone, hit record, and then started to slowly just move the bell around to strike the different chimes in interesting patterns at different velocity levels. Okay, now we're back in the studio. After grabbing the sample on my iPhone, just airdropped it over to my computer and dropped it into Logic Pro. Okay, so once the file was loaded into Logic, it was just a matter of taking some time to listen through to the whole recording. I grabbed about 4 minutes worth of samples and just scrubbing through the audio to find whatever sort of jumped out to me as inspiring. So I'll play just a little bit of it for you here. This is what it sounded like. There's lots here. I was just trying to capture different levels of intensity, different combinations of notes. There's lots of content here. After spending some time with this 4 minutes of audio, I ended up picking out one specific phrase that really jumped out to me. So that ended up being this specific sample. So I think I loved this sample because of that initial note hit, and then there's all of this time where the chimes are just sustaining almost like a pad, and then these little rhythmic elements kind of come and go across this sample, which is maybe 10 or 15 seconds long. So once I chopped out one specific sample, I had to deal with the noise floor, because you can hear in this sample lots of wind noise, lots of street noise, and birds chirping in the background, all sorts of things. And it's almost as loud as the sample itself, which is obviously a problem, especially if you're going to be triggering more than one instance of the sample at once. Then that noise floor is just going to stack up with each sample that gets triggered. So I had to denoise the sample, and in order to do this, I used a tool called Isotope RX8, which is an audio editor application that I really love. I used the spectral denoise tool inside of RX. Basically, you load in an audio file of the noise floor, just the ambient noise of wherever you did the recording. So for me, I took a little recording of the sound of my mom's backyard. It's only a few seconds long. You upload that into RX, and then it subtracts that noise floor digitally from whatever other samples are fed into it. So this is the sample pre-denoise. And then here it is with the denoise applied. So that noise is still there, but it's drastically reduced, and it's more of part of the ambience of the sound. It places it outdoors now than it being something that defines the sound. So after I had a denoised sample, it took a little while for me to figure out what to do with it to make this instrument practical for live use. Because most samples are going to be a single pitch, a single melodic note, you can stretch that around the keyboard and people can play it freely. But with a longer sample like this that actually has different notes throughout the length of the sample, it just doesn't make sense across all keys for a lot of music applications. So I ended up programming some really specific note triggers using the chord trigger inside of MainStage and Ableton Live, so folks could choose a specific key that they wanted to perform in, and then certain notes would trigger back different pitched frequencies of this sample. The end result is this really cool ambient sound bed that sort of happens underneath what you're playing and feels like it evolves over time, that I absolutely love. All right, now let's get back to some guitar sampling. Now, sampling a real instrument, meaning there's physical moving parts, vibrating strings, is a totally different animal than sampling a synthesizer that can send and receive MIDI data, because you're not just capturing the electronics, not just the notes that the instrument generates, but you're actually capturing the performance of the player. And for this instrument, the player happened to be me. Now, we were designing this specific instrument for Sunday Keys, which is all about layered worship patches. So I chose to voice this instrument in sort of the open position, like a rhythm guitar voicing. So if you maybe only had one guitarist who was handling lead, you could use this instrument to cover some of the rhythm space. Or if you don't have a guitarist on stage for a given performance at all, this is going to be sort of the least invasive way to add some of that guitar texture, that guitar sound, without making it sound like some big crazy lead guitar. So in order to help me be as efficient as possible and get really, really good sample captures, I used a great piece of software called Sample Robot. Now, Sample Robot is really cool. If you're familiar with the Auto Sampler plugin in MainStage, it can do everything that Auto Sampler can do, but that it can also help you actually sample performance or real-time instruments like an actual guitar or a piano or something like that. So it helps me not just get really clean takes of samples, but compare them against each other and stay as efficient as possible. Again, we wanted this to sound like a rhythm electric guitar, so we chose to sample all the open strings and then a single fretted note at either the 3rd or the 2nd fret for each of the strings, and then on the high E string also went all the way up to the 12th fret, walking up there in steps. So this sample depth kept the project rather limited in scope and size, so it's really lean and efficient for live performance, but it still gives you flexibility. And the most important thing about sampling the open strings and a fretted string is that when you play what would be an open string, one of those notes, you actually hear that open string ring out, which is totally different in feel than a fretted note or a fretted string playing the same note. So that's the only note in that scale that's actually going to trigger that open string sample, and everything else is fretted and then pitch shifted to cover all of those gaps. Okay, now let's talk guitar tone. I wanted to keep things as simple as possible for me here because that would make post-production or cleaning up the samples and building the instrument as simple as possible. Okay, so now I've got the camera flipped around here. Kept things really simple for this guitar sampling. I used the guitar I would normally use at church, which is a Gretsch double jet with some humbucking pickups. I went into a single guitar pedal. This is the Soul Food overdrive from Electro Harmonics. This is the always on overdrive pedal on my actual pedal board. It's a clone of the super hyped up and fabled Klon overdrive pedal. It's a clone of that circuit, sounds really nice. It's always on when I'm playing guitar, so I thought it fitting to sample here with it always on as well. Not adding a lot of drive, just some extra complexity. Then from there, straight into my Universal Audio Apollo Twin audio interface using the high Z input there. It's a really great sounding preamp, and this does the AD conversion as well. Really nice, super low latency as well, which makes it feel natural for recording these samples. Then from there, in the digital world, I used an emulation from Universal Audio of a classic Fender amplifier. This is their Fender 55 plugin. So I'm doing all the amp modeling here in the software world because this gives me really exact control. I'm able to use 2 modeled microphones here and avoid any phase issues. Then this audio was fed straight into Sample Robot, which does all of the sampling. Okay, so once I'd sorted out the tone, the last little component was I decided to use a quarter instead of a traditional guitar pick for the performance of all of these notes. Now, that might seem like it doesn't make much of a difference, and the difference is subtle, but this is something I like to do when I'm playing guitar in a band, and I need this extra little bit of just chime and bite in the attack. And I knew that getting great initial attack in these samples was a priority because that's so much of what defines the flavor or the feel of a given instrument. I knew that I could always dial the intensity of the attack back once I started processing the individual samples. I wanted to make sure that I had lots of bright attack initially up front in the recording process. Okay, so once I'd settled on the software, the note choices, the guitar tone, it was time to start sampling. Okay, we are here in my kitchen to take a snack break. Okay, well, not to take a snack break in this moment, but I'm here shooting video because it was a snack break that inspired the next instrument that I want to share this story behind. It's called Felt Heart. So I was in my studio doing some sampling late at night a couple of months ago. Oftentimes I do most of my sampling after my kids have gone to bed because the house is quiet, which is really helpful when you're trying to sample something. So I was sampling my grandma's auto harp that night. I had my Zoom recorder set up. I was grabbing a bunch of multi-samples, and I had a snack. just sitting next to me in a bowl, specifically in this bowl. And after I finished sampling, I had also finished my snack. I had a little more time left in my evening, so I thought that I would just try something, kind of chase a squirrel. So the auto harp that I was sampling is my Grandma Mary's, and the case had this little felt plectrum in it. So it's like a guitar pick, but covered in felt. And I had this empty bowl, so I ended up setting this bowl on the carpet right next to the recorder, and then just kind of striking the rim of the bowl with this felt plectrum. I didn't really have any end goal in mind here. I just had some extra time, had a mic already set up, and Logic was already recording. So I grabbed a bunch of different samples. I really loved the way that this felt covered pick gave the bowl, that glassy sort of bell sound, this interesting sort of mechanical click attack as the felt just scraped on the edge of the bowl. So I just left the recorder running for about 5 minutes and grabbed a bunch of samples. So after the fact then, I opened up my DAW, cleaned up all the samples, denoised them, dropped them into a sampler, and ended up with this. So this patch was really a happy accident. I just had time and the environment to be able to record these samples. But these are some of my favorite patches, the ones that I wasn't planning on creating, because it makes sure that I'm kind of paying attention to the spaces that I'm in when I have the chance to record something, trying to look for inspiration in those moments. Now, I'm not trying to make this out to be some super spiritual or mystical thing. It's a simple matter of just hitting record and making sound and then seeing if it works. A lot of the time it doesn't, but when it does, it's super fun. I love the way this patch turned out. I like playing it on its own as sort of a piano, electric piano replacement. Obviously it's got its own thing going on, but it can sit in that space. One of my favorite uses for it is combining it with an old sounding piano like the Sunday upright in Sunday keys. If you'd like to hear how that sounds for yourself, check out the well-worn Path layered patch that we added in Sunday keys in the January 2021 update. Okay, so that is the Felt Heart patch story. Now, we're gonna grab a snack and then we're gonna head back down to my studio. I wanna tell you about guerrilla sampling. Okay, so last year in January of 2020, we had the opportunity to go to the yearly NAMM show in Anaheim, which is the biggest gathering of music, technology, brands around the entire world. And it's an amazing opportunity for a synth nerd like myself to see not just brand new technology, but also to see really cool, rare, and vintage analog synthesizers that are on display. Now, NAMM every year runs Thursday through Sunday, and by Sunday of NAMM in 2020, we'd accomplished everything we set out to accomplish, so we essentially had a day to kill. So we decided to do something completely random that ended up being super fun that we named guerrilla sampling. So that morning, we just brought in our trusty Zoom H6 mobile recorder. We brought in a stereo aux cord, and then we just walked up to some booths that were displaying these really cool, rare vintage synthesizers or super complex modular synth rigs, and we just plugged the Zoom into them and started sampling them in real time on the NAMM show floor. We didn't get in any trouble, and the few folks that asked what we were doing, that we had conversations with, were actually quite entertained by our efforts. And it was a blast because it gave us the opportunity to grab samples from synths that we just would not be able to touch otherwise, like the Korg Mono Poly, the Roland Jupiter 6, the Sequential Prophet 600, some of the earliest pioneers of MIDI-capable synthesizers or even pre-MIDI synthesizers. So recently I've been getting back to those guerrilla sampling sessions and pulling out the individual samples that were recorded to create some playable instruments that are now available to you guys inside of Sunday Keys 2021 as of the January update. Alongside that, I've been continuing to pull samples and create instruments using samples captured from my DX7. So the first results of this guerrilla sampling are in Sunday Keys now, and I wanted to share a few of these instruments with you. Check them out. So after all the samples were captured for our guitar instrument, I spent some time dialing in the exact sample start points, making sure all the captures were clean, that they were as noiseless as possible. And then I also captured some additional guitar noise samples, like little bits of fret noise and things like that. The stuff that makes a guitar sound like a guitar, but you really don't notice until it's missing. So I placed some of those samples randomly in round robin loops to add just a little bit of extra realism that you can't get in Mainstage and Ableton Live's built-in guitars. Sampling a guitar from scratch for Sunday Keys was a real challenge, but a super fun process. And I'm really pleased with the results when you compare the custom jet guitar instrument that we came up with to the stock Mainstage and Ableton Live options. I think there's a clear difference in quality, in expressiveness, and the way the tone is dialed in for modern worship music. It also handles overdrive much better than the stock instruments inside Mainstage and Ableton Live. So I hope that you'll check out the custom jet guitar now in Sunday Keys 2021. Now, all of the sounds that we've talked about in today's Patch Stories episode are included in the January 2021 update to Sunday Keys. So if you own Sunday Keys 2021, you've already been emailed a download of all of these sounds, plus a bunch of other new sounds for Sunday Keys for a total of 25 new individual instruments added in January alone, for a total of over 50 new instruments added to Sunday Keys 2021 so far, with another batch coming in March. So if you'd like to learn more about Sunday Keys and see if it's right for you, then there's a link in the description of this video. We'd also love to hear from you about questions or feedback you might have on the processes we've talked about in today's video. We'd love to cover some of your most commonly asked questions in a future episode of Patch Stories. Thanks for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, if you like this format, leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, and let us know. That's a great way to support us so we can keep doing videos like this one. Thanks for watching.